So guys, you're welcome back to my channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to be sewing the corset blouse we drafted in our last video. So if you're interested in learning how I drafted this blouse, I'm going to be dropping the link in the description box for the tutorial. So let's get started. So guys, I'm going to be showing you guys how I transferred this pattern to my fabric. So these are the front pieces of the blouse, and this is the smallest part of the cup. I folded the fabric into two and I placed my pattern on it, making sure I added half of an inch stitching allowance all around the pattern. So you can see that the fabric is folded into two, and even the lining at the bottom is also folded into two. And I made sure that I placed the hairstay on the wrong side of each pieces. Now this is the largest part of the cup. You can see I added half of an inch on all the sides as well. That's half of an inch stitching allowance. I also gummed an hairstay to the wrong side of the fabric. You can see that the fabric is two pieces while the lining is also two pieces as well. Why this is the lower part of the front piece. So I folded the actual fabric into two and I placed the pattern directly on it. So the center fold of the pattern is directly on the center fold of the fabric. So I added half of an inch stitching allowance to the top of the center here, and I also added half of an inch stitching allowance to the cup part and on this side as well. Now for the stitching allowance at the bottom, I added half of an inch as well, and for the side I added just 1 inch stitching allowance on the side. So for the cup part of this corset, I'm going to be using an already made cup. So this is it here. It comes in different sizes. I'm using size 34. Now for the back pieces, I've placed my pattern paper to cut out the fabric. I added half of an inch stitching allowance to the top and at the bottom as well. On the side here where the loops will be attached, I added 1 inch, and on this side here, I added 1 inch just like I did for the front piece. So I've gone ahead to cut out the lining as well for the back pieces, and I also went ahead to place an hairstay on the wrong side of each pieces, just like we did for the front piece. So let's go ahead to stitch the front pieces. Now I'm going to take all these pieces away and I'm taking out the pattern for the lower part of the front piece. Now I'm going to spread out the actual fabric for the lower part of the front piece. So the next thing I want to do now is to determine the boning lines, because that is where we are going to be attaching the bias casing. Now at this top here, I'm just going to measure the center. So what I have here is 2 inches. I folded the tape into two to mark the center, and then I'll draw a straight line all the way down to the end of the blouse. So on this line, we are going to be having a boning casing here. Now the next line we are going to be drawing will be determined by getting the center of this round opening here. So I'm going to place my tape from the top here on the standing position to measure what I have. This is 12.5 inches. I'm going to divide this 12.5 inches into two with my tape measure, and whatever I get here, I'm going to place the tape again from the starting of the curve here to mark half of the 12.5 inches I just divided. So I'm going to mark it here, and I'll do the same for the other side as well. Now, once I'm done with that, I'm going to draw a straight line from this point all the way down to the end of the blouse. And I'll do the same on the other side as well. So now, once you're done with that, to make the slant lines, we're going to be marking 1 inch away from this new line we just marked. And then at the bottom of the center line, we're going to be marking half of an inch on both sides. Now we'll be connecting these 2 points together to form the slant line, just the way it is on the style inspiration. So once you are done with this, you go ahead to place your bias directly on all the lines. So make sure that you're pinning the bias tape directly on the line so that it doesn't shift while stitching. And afterwards, you're going to go ahead to stitch the bias tapes on both sides, that's the edges. So this is what I had after I was done stitching the edges of each bias tape. Now to attach the bias on the back pieces, I'm going to spread out the back pieces this way, and I'm going to be marking 2.5 inches from the center back on both sides, and then I'll draw a straight line across this point I marked. After this, I'm going to place the bias tape directly on this line to stitch the edges of the bias tape just the way we did for the front piece. And after stitching the edges of the bias, this is how it should be. So coming to the cut pieces, the first thing I'll do is to take out the lining underneath the actual fabric. And I'll also be removing the patterns because we don't need them for now, so that we can work on the actual fabric. So make sure that they are arranged in the proper direction. Then you go ahead to pick one from both sides to place them together this way. And then you go ahead to pick the other pieces to place them together this way. So now I'm going to go ahead to pin the edges on this side. So once you are done pinning the edges on this side, you go ahead to pin the edges on this other side for the second cup as well. So just go ahead to do the same thing. And after pinning, you are going to head over to your sewing machine to stitch on this side that you just pinned by 1/2 inch. And then I'll go ahead to do the same thing for the lining pieces as well. So guys, by the time you are done stitching it down, this is what your cup would look like. Now you are going to go ahead to notch the seam. So once you are done with that, you are going to place each cups on your tailor's arm this way so that you can open the seams with your iron. So make sure you are taking your time to do this. So guys, this is what I had after I was done ironing the seams. So like I said earlier, for this tutorial, we're going to be making use of a already made cup. So if you place your cup inside the fabric this way and the cup is a bit wider than the fabric, from here what I can see is my cup is like 1/2 inch on both sides wider than the fabric. I'm going to go ahead to fold the cup into two this way so that I will make a little dart from here, like 1/2 inch all the way down to this point. So you don't really have to make the dart to get to the end of the cup. You can see what I did here. So I also did the same thing on the second part of the other cup. Now, when you place the cup inside the fabric, you would notice that the fabric has properly covered the cup now. So once you are done with that, the next thing we are going to do is to attach the cup of the actual fabric on this space we have here. So you are going to arrange the cup properly, and then you start by pinning one of the cups, starting from the center of this lower part here. You can see what I'm doing. You just go ahead to pin the edges all around this opening. And once you are done pinning, you head over to the sewing machine to stitch the cup by 1/2 inch. So guys, after I was done pinning the first cup, I went ahead to pin the second cup exactly the same way, and this is what it looks like now. So guys, looking at the top of the cup here, you realize that it's about 1/2 inch higher than the sides of the body of the front piece. So I'm just going to use my chalk to draw it to enter into the body, and then I'll just go ahead to trim the excess at the top. You can see that it's very little, so take your time to do this. Now once you are done with that, the next thing you are going to do is to flip the front piece to the wrong part, and then you go ahead to notch the seam around the cup area. And once I'm done notching the seams, I'll go ahead to iron the seams before placing the cup. So placing the cup is actually very easy. What I'm going to do now is to place the cup into the space I have here, and then I'll go ahead to pin the lower part of the cup on the seam at the lower part here, and then I would pin the upper part of the cup by the edge on the seam around this part as well, and then I'll go ahead to pin this other side of the cup to the seam allowance on this other side. So if I flip this fabric to the right side, you'll notice that the cup is looking very relaxed and balanced compared to the other part. Now what we are going to do next is to cut hemming gum into pieces to place it in between the cup, that is in between the bra cup and the actual fabric. So what I'm going to do is these little spaces by the side of the cup, I'm going to be inserting hemming gum on each side, even at the top here. So now I'm going to go ahead to place this cup on my tailor's arm, and then I would use my steam iron to iron the cup properly. So make sure you are spraying water or using a steam iron, because that would help the heat to melt the hemming gum that is in between the cup and the actual fabric. So once you are done with that, you should also do the same thing on the second part of the cup. So guys, once you are done with this, the next thing we are going to do is to join the back pieces to the front piece. So I'm going to place the back pieces on the right pieces, right side to right side facing each other, and then I'll pin the sides together. After which I'll head over to my sewing machine to stitch the sides using the allowance that I gave, which is 1 inch. So once you are done with that, the next thing you're going to do is to notch the sides of the seam so that by the time you attach it to the lining, it wouldn't be bulky. So this is basically how it is. So I have my lining pieces here. I went ahead to stitch down the lining just like I did for the actual fabric. Now I'm going to place the right side of the lining directly on the right side of the actual fabric, and then I'll pin them together. After pinning, I would head over to the sewing machine to stitch the top following the direction of my finger by 1/2 inch. So after I was done making that stitch, this is what it looks like. Now I'm just going to go ahead to notch the seam at the top here. So once you are done making the notches, you are going to push the seam allowance at the top here towards the lining, just like you see me doing, and then you head over the sewing machine to top stitch the lining. So the essence of me top stitching the lining at the top is for the lining to sit properly so that it doesn't show in front. Now I'm going to go ahead to place hemming gum around the upper part area like you see me doing so that it would be more relaxed. So now I'm going to cut little hemming gums and place it in between the actual fabric and the lining at the top here. Then once I'm done with that, I'll go ahead to iron it so that it stays properly. So once you're done ironing the upper part, you would notice that at the front here, the lining isn't showing at all. So now it's time to pass the boning through the casing. So I'm going to show you guys how to pass one of the boning. This is the first one. I'm going to be placing it directly on the line, and then I'll cut the length that I need, making sure that the boning is 1/2 inch shorter than the length of the casing. So now I went ahead to melt both ends of the boning, and now I'm going to go ahead to insert the boning into the bias tape at the middle. So I'll do the same thing for the rest as well. So it's very important you secure the edges of the bias tape in such a way that the bias tape is wide enough to accommodate the boning. So after that, I went ahead to insert boning into the rest of the bias tape. So guys, after inserting the boning, you would notice that the blouse wouldn't be looking straight. All you have to do is to iron it properly. Make sure you're using a steam iron or you sprinkle water before ironing so that the boning will become flat and well relaxed. And once you have done with that, the next thing you're going to do is to place the right side of the lining directly on the right side of the actual fabric like I have done here, and then you make sure that the ends of the blouse is placed directly on each other, and then you go ahead to pin them together. So after pinning the ends of the blouse, you'd head over to the sewing machine to stitch by 1/2 inch, and then you go ahead to use your scissors to make notches around the seam, just like you see me doing. So after I was done, I went ahead to turn the blouse to the right side of the fabric from the center back, just like you see me doing. Take your time to do this because of the cup and the boning that is in the blouse. Now once you are done with that, you'd head over to the ironing board to iron the blouse properly. So after ironing the blouse, the last thing I'm going to do is to fold in the center back by 1/2 inch. So you can see I'm using my fingers to do this. I'm going to fold it in by 1/2 inch, and then I'll use the iron to iron the folded part so that it stays intact. And I would also repeat the same folding process on this side. So I'm folding in both the lining and the actual fabric inward by 1/2 inch, and this is for my loops. So ironing it this way would make it easy for us to insert the loops. So I've gone ahead a long strap with my actual fabric, and I want the length of the loops to be 2 inches. So this is what I'm cutting here, and I think I had about 20 pieces. So now I'm going to go ahead to mark the space I want my loop to be. At the top here there will be a loop, so after that I'm going to mark 1 inch distance from each other. So I'm just going to keep marking 1 inch distance from each other. Now to insert the loops, I'm going to fold the loop into two equally, and then I'm going to place the first one at the top here in between the fabric and the lining. Now I'm going to use my pin to hold this down. I'm going to go ahead to place the second loop on the second point I made, and then I'm just going to pin it down as well, I'll go ahead to fold the third loop into two as well to insert it in between the actual fabric and the lining, and I'll go ahead to pin this down. So that is what I'm going to do all through the points I marked. And once you are done inserting all these loops, I'm going to head over to the sewing machine to make a top stitch very close to the loops. And after that first stitch, I'm going to make a second stitch again about quarter of an inch away from the first stitch. So guys, this is what it looks like after I was done stitching. You can see both stitches on this side, and then I also repeated the same stitching on the other side as well. So I've also gone ahead to fold my bias tape into two to give me the rope for the back. So make sure you do exactly the same thing. You can actually use the fabric to make your rope. So now for the sleeves, this depends on how long and how big you want your sleeve to be. So I want the length of my sleeve to be 12 inches like I've measured here, and the width is 45 inches. And I've also gone ahead to cut out exactly the same measurements for the second sleeve. Now working with the first sleeve, I'm going to flip the fabric to the wrong side, and then I would fold the top of the sleeve in such a way that a half-inch elastic can be inserted into it, and I would also go ahead to fold the bottom as well. After folding the top and the bottom, the next thing I'm going to do is to cut the half-inch elastic that will be inserted into the elastic casing. For the length of the elastic, I used 10 inches. So I'm going to cut two of these, and then I would insert one into the elastic casing at the top. And because the elastic is short, I'm going to go ahead to hold this end together with the elastic, and then I'll keep pulling the elastic into the elastic casing so I get to the other end. And when I get to this end, I'm also going to use my pin to hold the end of the elastic. Now I went ahead to insert elastic into the elastic casing at the bottom of the sleeve. So once you are done with that, you are going to fold the sleeve into two equally this way, and then you go ahead to secure this opening by half of an inch, and that will be all for the sleeve. So make sure you do exactly the same thing for the second sleeve. So guys, once you are done stitching the sleeves, you turn the sleeves to the right side of the fabric, and the final step is to attach the sleeves to the armhole of this blouse. So I'm going to pick this part of the joining we have on the sleeve to pin it here, and then make a little stitch here, and I would also do the same thing on this side. So guys, after stitching the sleeve to the joining we have on the armhole of the blouse, this is how it should be. Thank you for watching to the very end. If you want to learn how I drafted this corset blouse, I'll be dropping the link in the description box. And if you're new to my channel, please subscribe and also turn on your notification bell so you'll be the first to be notified when I upload new tutorials. Bye.